Join me in today's video where I'll show you how I gave this little console table breath of fresh air with a coat of paint and a paint wash. This little console table has a lot of sentimental value to my client. She inherited it from her mum when she passed, and so she wanted something done to it where it could still remain in her home and fit in with the decor and still have a special place in her room. So let's go from orange pine to modern cream. If you hear crashing and banging, I apologize. It's the unit upstairs and I have no idea what they're throwing around. But anyway, the plan on this piece is to completely sand this back. We're going to whitewash the top, and then all of the bottom we're going to paint in white. So my first job, because this is a pine piece of furniture, and I'm making the assumption that at some point this has probably been waxed. So I'm going to give it a scrub with mineral spirits, which is going to break down any wax that may be left on the furniture. And then I'm going to go in with sanding. And the reason I'm doing that is if I go straight in with my sanding, if there is any wax on there, it's going to clog up my sandpaper in no time. And I'm just going to go through tons of sandpaper. Extra step, but it'll be worth it because I'll have a wax-free surface to start sanding. It'll be a lot smoother, less chance of pigtails when I'm sanding. So let's start with the mineral spirit clean down. I'll just liberally spray some mineral spirits on there. Take a scrubby brush and just scrub it down. And then once I've given that a good scrub, I'll just take a rag and wipe that down. Then I'm just going to flip it onto each side and do the same. Scrub with mineral spirits is finished. So now I'm just going to take a liquid sander, which is like a degreaser cleaner, is what it is, basically liquid sander. And I'm going to give it a scrub with this now, which will clean, remove any of the mineral spirits, and then I'll have to let it dry out and we'll be ready to move on to sanding. You've just seen me tape off the drawers, and now I flip this over on its top. If you remember, I'm going to be whitewashing the top and painting the base. So what I'm going to do is give all of this a coat with Zinsser, which is a shellac-based primer, and that will stick to anything and it'll give a really good surface for the painted here too. It's all nice and clean, it's fully dry now, and I'm just going to use just a cheap brush, not a chip brush because that'll shed into your primer, but just a cheap brush because either you're going to need to use mineral spirits to clean your brush off or throw it away. I'm going to do all of the base and the drawer fronts as well. You just want to apply thin coats. You don't want thick layers. Nice thin coats so they dry properly and have the most adhesion. You could use a roller to apply it as well, as long as you were happy to throw away whatever roller pad you were using. This is also a stain blocking primer. So if the pine was to bleed tannins at all, which is sort of that yellow coloring that you get through paint and wood sometimes, then this primer should stop that. This is sort of my go-to stain blocking primer. It does one of the best jobs of the primers on the market that I know of. Another good thing with using a brush on furniture shaped like this is it's all these curves, and you'd struggle with a roller to get in all the different nooks and crannies. This has had 2 coats of primer now, which have had a couple of days to fully cure. So now I'm just going to take a 300 grit sanding sponge, and I'm just going to lightly sand just to smooth out the surface before I go in with paint. And as you're going in and sanding, just use your fingers to feel, because sometimes it may look smooth, but once you've run your fingers over it, you'll be able to feel where there's any lumps or where it's not quite as smooth as it needs to be. I'm just going to spritz it with some water now and wipe away any of that dust from sanding. And the reason we do this is because we want the paint to adhere to the primer layer, not the dust sitting on top of the primer. These were the 3 color samples that I showed my client. So we've got the cream, I think that's a pure white, and that's an antique white. And we both agreed that this cream would suit the warm tones of the pine a lot better. So the cream is this, Bunty's Vanilla. So I'm going to grab a brush. This is a water-based paint. I'm going to grab a brush and give everything a coat of this paint. So I'm just going to give it a spritz of water just to moisten the surface. So that's it there. And I'm just using a small Klingon brush. Not sure which size this one is, because there's all these curved details and I don't want the paint to drip. And it's just thin coats and build them up. I've finished applying that first coat, which is just a really thin coat. And I'm going to leave that to dry fully overnight. And then I'll just keep applying thin coats until I've got the coverage that I want. I've given all of the underside 3.5 to 4 coats of paint, and I've lightly sanded with 600 grit in between, and I'm happy with the coverage that this is given now. So next step is to flip the tabletop over and whitewash the top. Before I apply the first coat of whitewash, I'm going to sand this down, and I'm going to start with 120 and then go to 180, and I'm just going to scrape back that paint that's pulled over when I was painting the underside so that I've got clean edges. So yeah, let's get sanding, and then I'll check back in with you when it's time to paint wash. I'm just using my scraper to scrape that off. I'm not going in hard because it's just fresh paint on there, so just gently. To sand this edge profile, I'm going to use these sanding blocks that have got different contoured shapes, and I'm going to find one that is going to match the contour of this best. It's a bit too tight, I think. Maybe that one. Yeah, I think that's going to be the one. Then you just pop your sandpaper down and then sand the profile like that. I've popped the 180 grit on now, so I'll just go in with that. So that, if you just put normal varnish on the furniture, that's the color it would go, that orange pine. So I've just sprayed some water on just to wipe off all that sanding dust. And yeah, that gives you a really good indication of how it would look if you just applied finish with no paint wash or anything like that. So if you wanted the orange pine look, then now you'd be good just to apply some wax or some varnish. Okay, so that is our surface all prepped. To make my whitewash, I'm going to take the same paint that I used to paint the base, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to do roughly 50-50 mix of paint and water. Okay, then I'm going to have some blue tissue handy. And the first thing I'm going to do is spray the surface or spill it all over it. Otherwise, oh dear. Honestly, I don't think I ever go a day in the workshop without some sort of mishap. Right, so what I was saying is that I'm going to mist the top just to moisten it, which will help the paint wash to spread a bit more evenly. And then I'm just going to go in with my brush, just apply it all over. And I'm just doing strokes in the direction of the wood grain. And as you can see, just dampening that wood beforehand just helps it to move much more easily. And luckily it's not too hot in the workshop, so I don't have to worry about the paint wash drying out super quickly. Now I'll take my blue roll and just wipe back. And don't worry too much about it looking splotchy, because this is just the first coat. So you just want to wipe back any excess that will come off, and then you can slowly build up the layers. You don't need to achieve full coverage with this first layer. This is just the initial coat. Then when your tissue is saturated, just grab another one and you're just wiping the excess away that hasn't soaked into the wood. Okay, so I'm happy with that for a first coat, and we'll leave that for half an hour just to dry up a bit, and then we'll come in with our second coat. It's been about 20 minutes, so now I'm just going to go in with the second coat of paint wash. So with this coat, I'm going to let it soak in for just a couple of minutes before I start wiping it back, just to get a bit more colour in on this layer. So that's how it's looking before I wipe it back. That's had just a couple of minutes to soak in. So same process, bunch of tissue and just start wiping back, and then once it's saturated, just fold it over. Otherwise you're just rubbing the paint around rather than removing the excess. And just always rub in the direction of the grain. Otherwise you'll see the paint wash streaks going in the opposite direction, which won't look very nice. So happy with that for that layer, and we'll come back again in a little while once that's had a bit of time to dry. Right, this has been drying for about an hour now, so I'm going to go in with a third. Oh, what did I say about mishaps? Honestly. So I'm just going to leave that 5 minutes, let it soak in a bit, and then we'll come back and wipe away. And I think this may be the final coat. So let's see how it is.
A few moments later.
And now I'm just going to wipe back. So I'm quite happy with that now as the paint wash final colour. What I'll do is I'll send a photo to my client just to make sure she agrees and she's happy with it as well. But I think that'll be ready for top coat once it's dried. Is take 800 grit sanding paper and just give that a very light sand just to smooth over the wood grain, because where we've been applying a water-based paint wash, 50% paint, 50% water, that water has caused the wood grain, the fibres in the wood, to swell. So it's just a little bit rough to the touch. So yeah, 800 grit very lightly, because we don't want to take any of that paint wash off, and that'll smooth it out ready for varnish. There's a few areas where sanding has just sort of highlighted some areas that have raised up. So I'm going to do a half a coat of paint wash just on those. I'm just going to leave that a minute or two just to soak in a tiny bit, and then I'll wipe it back. That paint wash has dried now, so I'm going to grab a paintbrush and some satin varnish. I'm just using the Ronseal interior varnish, and I'm going to give that a quick coat all over. So just long strokes in the direction of the wood grain, and that'll give you the nicest finish. And just watch for any of the varnish collecting anywhere. Just be sure to brush any drips or places where it's pulled together. I'm just being sure to apply really thin coats so that I avoid any dribbles, because the minute you start slapping it on in great thick coats, invariably you're going to get drips and bits where it just congeals together. So lots of thin coats are a lot better than fewer thick coats. Just being sure to work your way round the entire circumference of the leg. And always keep your eye out for drips and bits where it might have caught on the edge. First coat of varnish is on and drying. Whilst I was putting the varnish on, I was just looking for any areas of paint touch-up that were needed that I might have missed when I did a look over after I'd finished doing my painting. So once that varnish is dried, I'll go in, touch up a few tiny little areas with some paint, and then go in with coat 2 of varnish. This has had 2 coats of varnish now, which have dried. So now, as a final step, I'm going to go in with some Annie Sloan clear wax, just because I really like the look and feel that the wax gives. So it's just, the varnish gives some good protection. This is added protection, and I really like sort of the matte silky feel and look it gives. So I'm just going to apply a coat of that, wipe away the excess, let it dry, and then we'll buff it away. The first coat of wax that I put on has had time to dry, so now I'm just going to go in with my trusty buffing brush and buff that first coat out. And you want to keep going until you don't feel any sort of resistance from the wax. And I love this brush, it makes such quick work of buffing. It's specifically for wax, and it really does take the effort out of buffing. So I don't know if you can see on camera what a difference that's made and how much shinier it is. It's got a real sort of lovely satin sheen. And then once I've buffed, I'm just going to apply the second coat of wax, leave that to dry overnight, and come and buff it tomorrow, and then that'll be ready to drop off with the client. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more furniture projects. And if you have any questions, just pop it in a comment below. See you in the next video. Bye!